Hey there, I'm George from Pavliscak Studios, and I'll be making a glass marble today. I'm going to be using a propane oxygen torch. That was propane I just turned on, and now I'm adding the oxygen. And I'll be making the marble out of glass. I start with glass rods of varying sizes. Would be considered a large glass rod for my purposes. This would be more of a medium-sized one. Here's a magnifying glass so you can see them a little bit larger. And then my regular size glass rods are in the 5 to 6 millimeter range. If you watched the pre-show, you saw that I'll be making a swirl marble today. It will be mostly purple because I think last couple of weeks I was doing like brown. So it's going to be a transparent color core of purple. It's going to have stripes of white and purple enamel on it. Enamel is a powdered glass which is highly densely colored. So very little layer will really transform the design. And it has a soft look to it, which I like for a more natural flow of the design. Then over top of that core and that enamel powder stripes will be some aventurine, which is copper dust encased in glass, and some colors and clear over top of that, and it'll get twisted into a swirl like we saw in the pre-show. Once the core is formed, I'm going to shape it, and I'll talk about that as I go. So the first thing that I need to do is make the central portion of the marble, and I'm going to start with a medium purple transparent rod. There's a bunch of different ways to get a gather of color. You can get a gather of clear and color over top of it, or you could just push this together. You could take a bunch of rod sections and melt them together and then squish the air out. So for this one, I'm just going to start melting the tips of the rod, pushing them together, and then changing the angle from parallel to a slight angle, and as I turn them and push them into each other, the gather is going to get bigger and bigger. From there, I will shape that gather into a cylinder, which I will then press into more of a like a 2x4 board shape, a squarish tube, square tube, a rectangle that's rectangular in 3 dimensions, square in cross section, but longer than it is wide. I'm drawing a blank on what the name of that shape is. Like a board. Board shaped, I guess. So, I've heated the ends of the glass rods and I pushed them together. I'm already changing my angle and letting the molten part roll over the rods themselves, and it's solidified because I was talking and I took it out of the flame. But as I put it back in the flame, it's going to get softer and start moving, and I will, as I bend it and turn them, they will draw in more rod. What I'm going to want is something in the 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch in diameter cylinder, about 1 inch long. From there, I can shape the core and start doing my decorating. I like the transparent core that has color. It doesn't, you can't see all the way through it when it's a darker transparent color like this, but it does give it like a mysterious depth, which I like. If I had a furnace going that I could get nice clear out of, I would make some with a clear core and then decorate that median layer and then put clear over top of it, and now that really gives it a lot of depth. And that's how I make a lot of my marbles for kaleidoscopes, which are mostly clear but have some color in them that you can like see just below the surface and then look all the way through to the distant surface and then get the magnification of the marble itself. So my gather's gotten quite a bit larger here, getting close to the size that I want. I'm going to get a little bit bigger, and I'm going to start to shape the core to decorate it. So the interesting thing about glass is that you can see if I take it out of the heat of this propane oxygen flame, it solidifies pretty quickly. So very often as I'm working the glass, I can work it while it's in the flame. There's certain work I can do in the flame, and there's certain work I can do out of the flame, you know, when it's medium hot, not super hot. And a lot of times you're doing a reheat only so that you can work on the marble itself for like 2 or 3 seconds, or your whatever piece of glass you're working on, whether it's the core of the marble or a piece that you're going to add to the marble, or any glass blown. Alright, I have enough glass, this purple glass, for my core. I'm going to melt this rod loose. Oops, got a little streak there. Let's clean that up. Now, when I showed you earlier where my marble molds were, what they were sitting on was a graphite plate. And I use that for shaping too. And then I use a graphite paddle also for shaping. I have used steel, which gives you a little bit longer working time. As you work longer in glass and you have like a good idea of what you want to accomplish quickly, graphite is nice because it takes the heat out quickly also, so that you can move on to your next step. You might have seen a lot of glass blowers, and they're rolling, or what they call marvering, on a steel plate, and it seems like they're doing it for quite some time. And there's several reasons for that. One, the steel is not drawing the heat out of the glass that they're working as fast, and they're also working a larger volume of glass, which is going to retain more heat and be workable longer. This is a relatively small gather, and so it's going to be very sensitive to heat loss. So I'm going to roll it on the graphite plate and make it a little more cylindrical. And that's just going to take a few seconds. So I'm rolling it on the plate, and I'm also pressing down from above with the paddle. And I've made it into a cylinder. Now there's a lot of decoration and things that I want to do to this core, and having it attached to a glass rod is going to make, every time I heat it, it's going to start getting wiggly and want to fall towards gravity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach a steel handle to this free side, which is going to be a more stable junction and attachment point for me to be manipulating this marble. So this is called a punty, or most glass blowing. I sometimes refer to it as a handle, because that is a word that you all know. Throwing out too many terms and using them unconsciously is good for internal dialogue, but for describing it to other people, that's not as useful. Alright, so I've now attached the handle, stainless steel handle, and I melted off the other glass rod. Now I'm going to heat this all up and improve my shape. It's got some flat spots, so it's not particularly cylindrical. The end has got a little blib on it. Blib is the technical term, and the correct one, which you will be quizzed on at the end of the demonstration. You won't. But if you say blib, people will know what you mean. It'll be like any glass thing hanging off of the other glass thing you're working on. It's a blib, or splib, or blub. Maybe that's just me. Probably is. Alright, so I pushed it in and I improved the cylinder shape. I'm going to do a little bit more. You can see it's pretty hot, so it still wants to fall. That's good. I have the whole thing hot. if I let the attachment point get too cold, you run the risk of it cracking off. So let's just take it on the marver plate and make a little more improvement. We'll flatten the end a little bit more. And look at how hot it is. It's orange hot. It's actually purple glass, dark purple. Alright, I'm ready to start my decoration. The first thing I'm going to do is make it squarish. And once it's square, on those flat sides, that will define an area for me to put some enamel powder on and have it stick. And then it will make a stripe that's even from end to end. I could do it just on the cylinder, but there's going to be like a wide part and a narrow part. And it'd be a relatively thin stripe because that arc of the circle that touches the flat plate of enamel powder is going to start off as a line and then get wider as you push it. But if I pre-shape this into a square, like so, then the flat bits will pick up and hold the enamel powder. And that will make a nice backdrop to add some other darker colors that will show up very nice. And then on the whole thing, I'm going to put aventurine because sparkly is good. So I heated up the whole thing. I'm going to heat up one panel of this a little bit more, and I'm going to pick up some white enamel powder, and I'll show that to you guys. There's the white enamel powder I just picked up. Now on the other side, opposite of that white, I'm going to pick up some purple enamel powder that will complement our purple core. And then two panels will stay the medium purple transparent. That will look very nice. This is a lamp working technique. You probably won't see this in glass blowing so precisely. You'll see it a little maybe mushier and faster. There's always someone doing something unexpected, but in general, I would say this is probably unique to our lamp working experience, and probably to me specifically. So I don't know what that means. It's fun to see someone else do something weird that no one else is doing. And I'm heating each side and picking up sparkly aventurine foot. And this I'd like to be a little on the chaotic side. That's okay. But I got a lot of it on there, so it's going to be very sparkly. Now I can make it cylindrical again. There's several ways to finish this, the outer layer of this. I could take little sections of rod, I've shown this a few times, and then melt one end of the rod and attach them all the way around this. I didn't prepare a lot of round rod sections in advance, so I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to do the swipe gather method. And what I'm going to first do is swipe gather colors where I want the colors, and those colors are going to go right in the middle of each of the enamel powder layers for contrast. But before I do that swipe gather, I'm going to do orange in the white and dark purple in the light purple enamel powder. Because orange and purple is a very weird combination. But I like orange and I like purple, so I'm putting them together. So let's do that. So in the white enamel. I'm going to take this orange. It looks yellow, but on the tip of the rod you can see the color has struck when it cooled to that transparent orange. Colors are not perfect and are probably jumping around in the demonstration camera a little bit. The flame messes it, the sodium flare messes it. So this I'm letting firm up, but I'm still keeping it plenty hot in the flame. This I'm getting hot enough to start flopping around, and I want a good size gather, a nice little ball on the end of that rod. And then I'm going to touch and then pull leaving a stripe down the middle. Let's see, this side. Down the middle of that white enamel powder. You can see the color starting to stripe to the transparent orange. Now, on the other side, I've got a dark purple rod. I'm going to put this dark purple in the middle of the medium purple enamel. I made this a little crooked by pushing on it. When I applied that stripe of orange, and it was a little bit uneven, so I evened it out by pressing it on my marver plate while it was still hot enough to move around. And that corrected a little bit of the eccentricities of the width of that gather. This one went on nice and even. I'm still going to press it down a little bit wider to match the orange on the other side. Now I'm going to heat that up so it draws in together a little bit. Where the stripe meets the surface of the existing cylinder, it makes a right angle, and I want that angle to become more obtuse and spread out and pull in to the core a little bit. It's going to be fighting me a bit because enamel powder is a little bit more not amenable to drawing in with surface tension. But let's get a medium-sized clear rod, which I'm going to do all my swipe gathers for the outer layer with. I'm going to start flashing it to gently bring it up to temperature. I'm flashing it in the back flame, so it's heating up even slower. Once I get it over about 500 degrees, it's less likely to crackle and pop, so I don't have to flash it as much. Flashing is this waving through the flame. Each time I wave it through the flame, I'm increasing the temperature of the rod a little bit. So at room temperature, glass is an insulator, and it doesn't want to increase in heat. Once it gets over a certain point, the resistance to heat change diminishes. So you heard a lot of noise there, and there was an outer layer of this glass rod that was cracking off. And so that's going to be a little bit sensitive. Where those cracks appeared, bubbles might appear in the rod, and you might see me later, before I start swipe gathering on this marble, you might see me get a pair of tweezers and pick the bubbles out of this rod so that I'm not taking the bubbles and pushing them into what's going to be the surface of my marble. And in fact, I see there's some sedation on some of that gather too. I'm going to get that off while I see it. When the clear gets hot, you can see all of the bubbles and impurities quite clearly in this surface and below the surface. Once the rod starts melting, that's not going to be an issue. It will start melting and continue melting pretty smoothly. It's just when you get it started up that You can see surface scum and bubbles from little cracks that might appear. Anyway, I think we've got most of that taken care of now. The gather is starting to really move and approach the size where I'm ready to start doing my swipe gathers. And when I say swipe gather, I'm going to do it the same way I did that orange line and that purple line out there. I'm going to touch and move down the line, down the cylinder, and then using the heat of the flame, separate it. So there's my first swipe gather of clear down the cylinder. Because this is a big rod, I'm going to need less gathers than had I initially chosen a smaller diameter rod. And it's going to go on more deeper layer of clear, which is going to add to the overall size of the marble. So that is also going to contribute to the depth of our design. It's the second camera. It looks like we'll need about 6 more of those. Well, and I'll try to do like 2 in a row before I pause, or I'll show you quickly. They happen a little faster. The first one is always the slowest, and then afterwards they'll happen more quickly. Once I get all the swipe gathers on here, then I can start cleaning up the ends, and then I will start, once the ends are twisted, or cleaned up, I can start adding the twist. So the phone where I'm using my camera for this demonstration has been pretty capricious lately, and I've had to reset it. And currently I'm not seeing any comments or who is watching. So I will, after the demo, if there are any questions, I will answer them. Sometimes I have my wife will come in and read questions for me, but she is working right now. Or screwing around somewhere, I hope. Not working. It's 6:30, so. Alright, so we've got about 2/3 of our way around. 5 gathers, I think, on there. You can see that is still uncovered. This is covered. When I have all the gathers on, I'll start heating the unattached end and bending all that clear over towards the pole. And what that's going to do is protect the enamel, which once it's encased, it's very stable, but any exposed enamel over time is going to get kind of fizzly with the clear glass and can make a lot of take your clear overlay and make it very fuzzy and dirty looking. So folding over this clear on the end and pulling the ends of that enamel down to more of a point will contribute to the pole's final look, and they should on either side come together to a point or near a point. Alright, so I got all my clear on there, and it's not really cylindrical anymore, and that's fine. It's all coated with clear and to a pretty even depth. So at this point you could come in with a jack or a scissor and start squeezing that down, but before I squeeze it down I want to take the glass and push it over the edge. And I just find that gives the core a more pleasing final shape. So you won't see like a cylinder within the sphere. You want it to look more spherical. Both looks are fine. Depends on what you want. Do you want it to look like classic old world glass blowing, or do you want it to look like a perfect art glass style marble? So, let me see, I just pulled that over to a point. I'm going to go in and dig in now a little bit and move those stripes a little bit more towards the end. But another thing that does is it gives me a nice attachment point on some extra glass, which is not going to be in the final design, to put my next hand in so that I can twist this one. So I pulled the clear to the end, made that black. Then I also dug in there while it was molten and pulled those clear enamels down to more of a point so that they weren't just floating in space near the edge of the cylinder, where the cylinder meets the disc of the end of it. So it's becoming more of a cone where all the design elements come to a point, but there's some messy glass on the end, which is going to come off later. So I'm boring in with a steel rod. Now I'm going to detach this end and do the same cleanup. To this end. You can see the design ends at the end of the cylinder. So I want to pull the clear over the end and then pull those little panels of enamel down to a point, like this. Closer to finished. Because most of this whole gather is going to be the marble. There's going to be a little bit on the ends that come off, as opposed to like a traditional glass blowing where you could have like quite a bit of waste. You know, maybe 20% on each end, which might get cut off. And if you have big end pieces, marble ends, you can make little tiny marbles out of those if you like, because some of them are really cool. Like this. See all kinds of cool crap in there. Alright, so this is getting hot. I'm ready to get in there. I'm going to bend those. Pull the ends of those stripes down a little bit first. Start pulling the clear over. Get a little bit more. And that's what I did. Now, I'm going to attach a steel handle to that other side, the other little clear nub. And I'm going to heat that whole marble. Get the heat even throughout the whole marble. Let it maybe start to get a little cooler on the ends, so that when I twist it, most of the twisting goes into the center of the marble. And depending on the size of the stripe or the precision of the stripe, that will sort of allow or tell you how much spin you can put in without losing your design. There's also certain colors which are more resistant to being spun out and rarefied, and other colors which will rarefy quite quickly, so that you won't be able to tell that they were even a stripe if you twist them too much. Now the heat is evening up in here, and you can see I've already started to get a little twist going on in there, adding more as we speak right now. The surface is a little bit uneven, but it should start pulling itself into a sphere as I add more and more heat. And I'm just tweaking a little extra twist in there as it's heating up. Turning with both hands and catching alternately with either hand to try to get the twist in there evenly. I don't want just the end to twist, or the ends, both of the ends, to just twist. I want the middle and the whole marble to twist evenly. So I'm going to take my time and let the heat get into the marble and become twisting slowly until it gets to the point where I feel I've done enough twisting, and I'm at that point now. So I'm heating up one of the attachment steel rods, and I'm going to pull it away out of that clear blob that I had left under there. Now, while it's still hot, I'm going to get in with my glass working jacks, in this case barber scissors, and really heat up that end. I'm going to put in a line with the scissors that's perpendicular to the rotational axis that I've made. See there? Now, as I am squeezing it ever more, I'm also twisting it. And then when it gets thin enough, I'm going to use the cooler part of the scissors and pop it off. And there is a little marble nib. Got some color in it and stuff. And I'll just let that cool down, and if it doesn't explode, I'll put it in my jar. And maybe it'll get used for something, or maybe it'll just get melted in a crucible and get pulled down into rods that I use for handles or cores of marbles that are going to have opaque covering, glass pressings for like a little marble stand. Alright, so since I've twisted that little nub off, you can see all the design elements have come to a point. Each other. Looks good. That is what I wanted, and that is what happened. Practice is good. Now I'm going to use my hemispherical mold and improve the sphericalness of this side just a little bit. And that side is looking quite marbly. Now I'm going to get a glass handle on there. I'm going to put a big attachment point rod that I'm going to attach with, melt it on the end, make a big attachment point. Now I can detach the other steel rod side and do the same cleanup as I did the first time. I'll make a line perpendicular to the axis of the rotation with my jacks. And that's the most, the part where you want to get it precise. You don't want to have your angle off. So you just gently go in there first and establish your line and then start to squeeze it. And if things are going good, you can continue and just finish the whole process in one go. I'll pause probably so I can show you guys. That made the line, and it's here perpendicular to the axis of rotation. And I think there's a bubble in there, and I want to get that out. Pull all my design to a point on the end. So I'm going to heat that back up. Keep squeezing that line that I've impressed, and keep rotating it. And then when I get closer and it's thin, then I'm going to use the cooler part of the jacks and then pop it off. Now I'm going to heat the marble and improve its sphericalness a little bit, and then examine the little point that I rotated the pole down to. That's what it looks like. I think it looks okay. If it looks messy, and you can always take more off. If your marble's cold, you're not going to be able to get a precision cut of a small amount off. If your marble's hot, you can get in there, but you have to be careful not to bend or misshape the design. So it's a balancing act. So I've improved my sphericalness, and my design comes to a point like I wanted it to. It's not super spherical yet, but the design looks good. So I'm going to heat up 2/3 of the marble, and then I'm going to use my marble molds rather than just like as a gentle persuasion to improve the sphericalness. I'm going to really get in there and start editing the shape. So I'm going to go into a hemisphere that's larger than the marble. I'm going to start at the coolest point towards the handle, pulling it, and then pushing it out as I rotate to the end to get it as round as I can in a hemisphere that's larger than the sphere that I'm working on. Then when I've done that, just for like 2 or 3 seconds, I'm going to switch to a smaller graphite hemisphere and just use the rim of that portion of the mold and rotate the marble and change the axis of rotation, and just using that rim of the hemisphere is going to improve my sphere shape even more. So rotating it and changing the axis of rotation. And that's making the marble quite spherical. It's a little bit oblate, but the side that's unattached by handle now is quite good. So I'm going to flame polish it. Let the flame soak a lot of heat into it. Let the surface get very smooth. Then use a little patience and let the surface chill just while I'm spinning it like this. And then when the surface gets hard but the inside is still molten, I'm going to get my cherry wood marble mold. just for like 3 seconds, 2 seconds, and each of those rims rotate the marble and change the axis of rotation. And then that surface is smooth. Look at the reflections from the lights above, and you can see they're not jumping around. So the surface is smooth, and you can see the sparkles of the aventurine as I turn it. Now I'm going to get another glass rod. This one has a broken end, so I tapped it off. I'm going to melt it and shape it down to a point. Then my last attachment point is going to be small. But the surface of my marble has to be just the right temperature too. If it's too hot, those two surfaces will fuse together. If it's too cold, they won't stick at all. So I want somewhere in between. I'm going to take that big connection point, the one in my hand now, and melt that off. And there's going to be like some clear glass left on the end. I'm going to get in there and just tweeze that off without disturbing the surface of the marble. So, like when I say I take stuff and melt down my mistakes into a crucible and then melt it all, I pull it into glass rods, and those glass rods become the handles that eventually become the waste that I'm tweezing away a lot of times, which is good. You know, you get one last use out of that glass, and it doesn't become a product, but it's useful as a tool. So I've got just like a little nub where that clear was. Tweezed most of it off, and then I used my paddle to take that last little nub and join it into the surface. And now I just need to improve the sphericalness on this unattached side one more time. So I'm going to do what I did last time. I'm going to heat the marble, let the heat get inside the sphere, but it's also making the surface smooth. And since it's already all hot, this is happening pretty fast. It's just all coming back up to temperature. You can see it's very hot. I'm just going to let the surface harden a little bit. And I'm using gravity and spinning to also keep an eye on my shape and improve it. I'm going to go into my graphite or my cherry wood marble molds. Cherry, that's suffused in water with holes drilled in it. So I'm just using the rim, which is all burned in and carbonized. Okay. You can see the dry ones are ones where the hot glass touched. Now this marble, just checking it for surface finish and any surface impurities, and it looks really good. So I'll let it cool down a little bit. Now in the pre-show, there's a fiberboard plate that's next to me. It's got some divots in it. I'm going to rest this marble in a divot, use my jacks to chill that connection point, and then we'll tap it off. And come back and get my torch and polish that little nub off so it disappears. So let's chill that attachment point. Chill and tap. Came off. Pick up my torch. I don't want impurities getting in my marble, so I'm going to tap it and see if I can get any soot that's built up in there out. Good. Now I'm really going to crank the heat in there for like 3 or 4 seconds and then let it rest. Another 3 or 4 seconds of intense heating, then let it rest. And last time, it's really closing up. That last little mark. And now while that is cooling in that fiber board with the divots in it, I'm going to take a wire tweezer and heat it up until it becomes orange. and then let it go down to black. And that's the temperature of the marble. So I can pick it up without shocking the glass. There it is. And now I'm going to go put it in the annealing oven where it will sit for 2 hours at 960 degrees. Be right back. So I have a little shelf inside of my annealing oven, actually a kiln shelf, and it has some little divots for putting marbles in, and also some holes for, like if I'm making beads, I can poke the mandrels in there so that they stay stable while they're annealing. And that's just letting all the bond angles in the glass, since I've pushed and twisted and mixed different colors and different densities of glass together, their bond angles can sort of realign to their tetragonal shape, and then cool gently through any strain points over a period of several hours, and then the glass will be very stable forever, hopefully. All right, well, I'll read through if there's any questions on today's demo. Otherwise, thanks for coming, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.